I could start our next story with a knock-knock joke, but I won't, as it will probably be met with silence. Because this story is about Japan. The East Asian nation is turning into a ghost town. You already know that its population is shrinking. It fell by 500,000 last year. Deaths are rising while birth rates are sinking. And this has bred a new problem. The island nation is now home to millions of vacant houses. They sit empty and unlit in suburbs and rural areas alike, surrounded by overgrown, unkempt gardens. And there's about 11 million of them. The situation is so bad that the government has stepped in. But now these antique homes have a niche clientele. They have found their place in the luxury market. Here's a report.
Who wouldn't like to live in an antique Japanese home? Especially if it's being sold for a few $1,000s. But here's the catch. It may have a terrible rot. Its roof could collapse at any moment. And it's probably under attack by unruly weeds. We're talking about the island nation's abandoned empty houses. And the Japanese have a name for them. They're known as Akiya, and now they've become the country's newest problem. Because a housing crisis is haunting Japan, turning it into a ghost town much faster. They already have a demographic crisis. Their population fell for the 12th consecutive year. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said if this continues, Japan will disappear. It has one of the lowest birth rates in the world, but also one of the highest life expectancies. And last year, twice as many people died as were born. So now, millions of houses are vacant. Japan has a glut of unclaimed properties. The most recent government data is from 5 years ago. It reported 8 million vacant homes across the country. That's about 14% of their overall housing stock. But experts say this number has drastically increased. Now it stands at 11 million. And in the next decade, over 30% of all houses in Japan could be empty. The population crisis definitely plays a role here. But there are other reasons for this too. There is a valuation problem. Houses in Japan decrease in value over time. Eventually, they're worthless. Only the land retains value. So owners don't want to maintain an aging house. There is little incentive. There is an inheritance problem too. Homes are being abandoned by the heirs of previous owners. And some homeowners die without ever naming an inheritor. Others leave the properties to relatives who refuse to sell simply out of respect for the elders. And while the Akiya continue to wither away, they don't suffer in silence. They are potentially hazardous and prone to collapsing. Not to mention, they also mar the scenery. But experts say they're also threatening the emotional health of Japan, as they've sparked numerous family disputes. But now authorities are stepping up. Consultants are helping squabbling families, and the government is also giving these homes a push. They're subsidizing demolitions, collecting neighborhood reports on maintenance, holding awareness programs, and allowing local authorities to raise property taxes on Akiya. They're also compiling listings of vacant houses, calling them Akiya banks, due to which these abandoned homes have found a new love. They've caught the eye of foreign clients who appreciate Japanese homes like its residents can't. And now these homes have become luxury properties. International buyers are snapping them up. They want to preserve the cultural integrity of Japan's antique homes, and they're buying them for tens of thousands of dollars. Akiyas are being renovated. Sometimes they become homes to new families. Other times they're Airbnb rentals, because one person's decrepit can be another's cultural uniqueness.
The great power rivalry has a new front. The cold, icy terrain of the Antarctic. China is making moves even in the Antarctic. And what is China doing there? Building a base to snoop on its rivals. So first the balloons, then the secret police stations, and now surveillance bases in the Antarctic. Clearly, China is very serious about spying and control. It is building its 5th station in the Antarctic. It already has 4 stations. Now a 5th one is coming up. Let me show you some satellite images. This is where the new Chinese station is coming up This is the Inexpressible Island. It's the name of an island in Antarctica, Inexpressible. It's a small rocky island near the Ross Sea. On first impressions, this looks like a major facility. Some reports have also emerged. They reveal China's construction plans. They say the new station will have an observatory with a satellite ground station, sites for energy generation, areas for research, a helipad, and a logistics hub. What will China do with such a large facility? The West has its suspicions. It believes China will use it to snoop on the region. The equipment on the site might serve a dual purpose: scientific research and spying. And how does that work? Reports say this base could potentially intercept satellites of other nations. Which other nations? Let's pull out the map to understand. This is the site of China's next station on the Antarctic. Now let's zoom out. What do you see on the north? Australia and New Zealand. If China starts snooping from the new site, Australia and New Zealand will be the obvious targets. The Chinese base is well positioned. From here, China can intercept signals and gather intel on Australia and New Zealand. It can track the rockets launched from Australia. And here's something you should know. China's presence and interest in the Antarctic is not new, but the threat perception is. China has been working in the region since the 1980s. It has built 4 bases here over the years. 4 bases. This is going to be the 5th one. Beijing calls them scientific research centers. But the US has its doubts. In 2022, the US Defense Department published a report. It was about the Chinese military, but it also had a section on China's presence in Antarctica. Listen to what it said. China's strategy for Antarctica includes the use of dual-use technologies, facilities, and scientific research, which are likely intended, at least in part, to improve the PLA's capabilities. The PLA, of course, is the Chinese Army, the People's Liberation Army. That's the Chinese strategy according to the US. Is this even legal? The answer is no. There are clear rules of operation in this region. We're talking about the Antarctic Treaty of 1959. It spells out 3 rules. All activities on the Antarctic must be peaceful. Military personnel are allowed on the continent, but only to participate in scientific research. They cannot engage in military activities like setting up bases, carrying out maneuvers, or testing weapons. All of this is not allowed. And China is party to this treaty from 1959. But then again, China is not famous for following rules. Now, for most of us, the Antarctic is a massive patch of land covered in ice, a place where no one can live. But the fact is, the Antarctic is a crowded place. At least 30 countries have stations in the region. 30 countries, including India. India, too, has a base there. Do you know how many bases there are in all? At least 82. According to one estimate, there are 82 bases, so the Antarctic is getting crowded. The question is why? Why are so many countries interested in this cold and remote region? 2 reasons: strategic and economic. Antarctica sits at a crucial point on the map. It falls in the middle of 3 key oceans: the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, and the Pacific Ocean. And this makes the Antarctic a critical point for satellite communications, for surveillance, and also for navigation, which is why so many countries want a piece of the Antarctic. The second reason, like I said, is economic. And on this front, too, the Antarctic could have a huge potential. None of this has been proven yet, but several experts say this region has billions of barrels of oil. It has rich reserves of natural gas, even precious minerals like gold and platinum. As of now, drilling is not allowed in this region. The Antarctic Treaty prohibits it. But these rules could change in the year 2048. That's when the treaty comes up for review. And that's what countries like China are waiting for. When this treaty expires, anything could happen. Countries could even push for Antarctica to be divided. So science is just a proxy for geopolitics here. The real game is about dictating the future of the Antarctic. The race is already on. China's expansion is aimed at the future. It would want to control large parts of this region. The West will push back and a new battleground will emerge.
An Indian becoming a UK PM.
Well, it's not like that we are going to get the Kohinoor back. But at least India is on its way to the top, huh?
But Gautam sir, there's actually not much to celebrate.
Why not? An Indian is ruling the UK.
Indian leaders in third countries often tend to overcompensate for their minority handicap.
Key.
For example, Sunak's Home Secretary of Indian origin, Suella Braverman, disapproved of India-UK free trade because it would encourage people immigrating to the UK, and the majority of whom were Indians. Structurally, India and UK have passed baggage, but still hasn't been resolved. And that is why,
Ladies and gentlemen, India needs to significantly temper its expectations from Rishi Sunak. Presenting Vantage with me, Palki Sharma, a first-of-its-kind global show with an Indian perspective.